Welcome to Treasure Hunt. This is a series that we are doing that involves Bible archaeological discoveries, and we try to stay update in our release of these as they happen. Something that showed up this past week up in Galilee, actually in the eastern area of Galilee, was a farmstead, and it dates back to over 2,100 years old. There's some interesting things that have been found there, but they are just getting underway. Archaeologists digging in the Galilee area have uncovered an incredible find. It is a farmstead, and evidence points to it being around 2,100 years old. You can see the Galilee area, and you see the white arrow points to the Sea of Galilee, and so we're over in that eastern area. And here is some of the dig as it goes on. Once again, it's on a hillside for protection, as well as look how green things are, and for farming. You can see in the forefront the man with the wheelbarrow turned over. That gives you an idea of some of the layout of this farm. And this is a drone picture as they've laid these out with rocks and they work the areas. Look at the pottery showing up. A lot of vessels around to carry water to their animals and out to their crops. There's a little different shot. And so let's take some history into this, and then we'll look at some real close-up pictures of some of the finds. The date for the discovery is during the Hellenistic Hasmonean dynasty from 142 to 63 BC before Christ. This dates it before the Lord. And during the Maccabean period, the farmstead is showing up totally Jewish. However, there was a wrench thrown into the cog here, and I'll show it to you in a couple of minutes with perhaps explanations that were given by the archaeologists. Hellenists were Christian Jews who spoke the Greek language and adopted the Greek culture. It was not a problem for them to speak the Greek language, the Christian Jews, but when they adopted the Greek culture, that was a very worldly, a very, very liberal culture to adopt, and it was a walk away from the Word of God and the teachings from the Torah, from the first 5 books of the Bible. The Hasmonean dynasty came about in this way. In 142 before Christ, Simon, who was the last survivor of the Maccabee brothers. We know about the Maccabean revolts, and he was the last one still alive. He was recognized as a high priest and a political leader by his own people. He severed bonds of allegiance to the Syrian rulers. And keep in mind, the Greeks are in charge. He got the Greek garrison out of Jerusalem, just purged it out of there, and began to mint his own coins, the first ever by a Jewish state, by the way. He was succeeded by his son, John Hyrcanus, who established the Hasmonean dynasty. These were a series of kings, and he appointed himself as a king. So if you look at this chart that we have, there are some things that are very interesting. You see John Hyrcanus at the top, and we'll just call it the Kingdom of Judea. You can see his ancestors and his sons as they drop down. What is interesting, once we leave the green tone family tree and go over to the crimson Herod tree, the Herodian dynasty, notice what connects them. Because you get down into there, you have Jonathan Alexander and Salome Alexander wedding, and they have a daughter named Mariamne. and she was one of the wives of King Herod the Great. And we all know who he was. He was the one about the wise men and trying to kill the baby Jesus. So once that marriage took place, the dynasty was gone, and the Hellenistic period sort of just fizzled out, and Rome started ruling then. So that gives you a little bit of history of who the Hellenists were and who the Hasmoneans were in their dynasty. So now that I would read something about that, it will give you an insight into the timeline, the time zone that this farmstead existed. Dr. Armenian Abu Hamid, who is the director of the dig from the Israeli Antiquities Authority, said, quote, "We were very lucky to discover a time capsule, frozen in time, in which the finds remained where they were left by the occupants of the site. And it seems that they left in haste in the face of an impending danger, possibly the threat of a military attack." There's Dr. Abu Hamid on site. There's no indication of who owned the farmstead, but they did abandon it quickly. Coins, loom weights, iron tools, and other artifacts will provide clues as the dig is ongoing. There is more coming up, and there are some few things that we can share with you right now. First of all, I mentioned loom. These are loom weights. They'd be used to pull threads and counterbalance and keep things tight so that they could weave carpets as well as clothing. Also found a lot of iron tools. And on a farm, you would have various ones. You see one that appears to the far right to be a pick. See the hole in the center that they would have put wood stick through that, or a tree limb. And many of these others would be fashioned in the same way. To the one on the far left, you see the hole on the top. Perhaps it hung off a tool bench out in a barn somewhere. Then there was what is called, this was a candle, and the remains of a candle. Abu Hamid added this: the weaving loom weights were still on the shelf, and the storage jars were intact. And we saw pictures, well, I don't have them to show, but storage jars were everywhere, and that were being found in the site, in the ground, almost in every one of those boxed off areas. We know from the historical sources that in this period, the Judean Hasmonean kingdom expanded into Galilee, and it is possible the farmstead was abandoned in the wake of these events. There's a lot of wars, there were a lot of battles, and there were a lot of skirmishes that went on, and it would pour over into the farmlands, and it would be nothing for an enemy to come through and burn everything or take people for their side. So this is understandable why people would flee this and just run. More research is required to determine the identity of the inhabitants of the site. Now here's something that I said would throw a monkey wrench into the works right here. Within this site, they found a pocket idol. This has nothing to do with the true and living God Jehovah. Had nothing to do with Jewish worship, except we do find in the Bible that there were household items, and there were pocket idols, as well as the very public ones that were put up and for people to bow down to and worship when Israel was very backslidden. So the question is, how did this get here? Did these people while they claimed to be Jews, and they lived in Jewish territory, were they worshiping something privately out of fear, or did they need to have this in case they were stopped by someone from a side or a culture, or I'll use the word religion, that was not Jewish, not Hebrew, not Israeli. But anyway, that was found. And once again, here's some more digging. A little bit more closer up, do you see the pieces of shard on the right? They're pieces of pottery called shards. But look just around at the edges. Do you see the pots? Some still on the ground, some this man is uncovering, and some up on the ledge that they've already found and just set there. More research is required, as we've already said, to identify who lived here and whose life that we are digging up. And so we'll keep you up to date on what's going on here. I can say, as we close, the excavation is continuing as I speak. The surface has barely been scratched, or should we say brushed, as archaeologists would use. So thanks again, and I hope that you learned something. Go ahead and Google this, and you may get some more details and more updates, since this has been recorded in 2022 in our spring. So God bless you, and please check out my playlist for other archaeological digs and treasure hunts as we find incredible finds in the promised land, in God's land, in Israel.